Ladies and gentlemen, how are you? I am going to mute the participants. Give me a second, please. Okay. First of all, Chag Ha'atzmaut Sameach to everyone. We are celebrating the 72 years of Medinat Israel. It's a really incredible occasion, an incredible miracle. The more I learn about it, the more I read about it, the more I realize that we are in front of, undoubtedly the most important miracle in the modern history of Israel. It has all the components of a miracle. I might end with that, okay? The subject that I, together with NYC, we thought about it for tonight is the contribution of Sephardic rabbis or Sephardic thinkers or Sephardic leaders to the creation of the State of Israel. So I will tell you a couple of stories that might not be known. Let me begin by telling you that, like, the first official establishment of a Jewish colony in Eretz Israel was at the time of in the 16th century, and it happened after two important things. After the Jews were expelled from Spain in 1492, many of them went to Turkey, and from Turkey they migrated to Eretz Israel. At that point, the most established colony was the colony in Sefat. That from 1530 on, the colony developed, and in 1540, 1550, there were also Jews in Jerusalem. I mean, there were always Jews in Jerusalem, but like a colony. They were extremely poor, and they suffered untold tragedies, both of them, like an earthquake in the city of Sefat, or a lot of poverty and persecution in the city of Jerusalem. But somehow this could be like the first attempt to come back to Israel and to establish ourselves in Israel, to the point that one rabbi, the Rabbi Yaakov Berav, he thought to do a new Sanhedrin. This new Sanhedrin, and he started with this. This is 1530. This new Sanhedrin was the idea of the Sanhedrin in Sefat was to empower the rabbis of Israel to decree and to decide in halachic laws for the entire Jewish people. Because up until then, since the time of the Mishnah or of the Gemara, every rabbi had authority over his own community. And there was no rabbi or institution, organization that had authority to decide the halakha for the entire Jewish people. Right now, because for the first time in centuries, since the year 135, when we were expelled from Judea, since that time, we were for the first time established and somehow organized in the state, in the land of Israel. So Rabbi Yaakov Berav, he thought this is a very promissory time and very positive time to establish the Beit Din. So he did that, and actually he gave a special semicha, a special ordination to certain rabbis, to 7 rabbis. Among them, most famous of them is Rabbi Yosef Karo, that he was from that time and from that place, from Tzefat. There was a big discussion with the rabbis of Jerusalem, a big debate, because the 1 or 2 rabbis of Jerusalem, Rabbi Levi ibn Habib, he was not very pleased that they were doing this. There are so many different opinions regarding what were the reasons, but in any case, the Turkish government, which, you know, that's another reason why the Jews were able to establish themselves in Jerusalem, because of the fall of Constantinople. So the Christian forces in Jerusalem or in the Middle East were going down, and the Ottoman forces were going up. And as you know, in those days, we were in a very good relationship with the Turkish, with the Ottoman Empire, especially in 1530, 1540. If you remember the story of Gracia Mendes, she also wanted to establish a Jewish state, actually, in Tiberia. It's a long story. So in the 16th century, we see the first coming of the Jews to Eretz Israel. The Jews were always there in bigger or smaller numbers, but there was always a Jewish presence. But that time was very special because the idea was to do a Sanhedrin. And the Turkish, when they knew this, they said, oh, Sanhedrin means they want political independence from us. So they persecuted Rabbi Yaakov Berab, who had to flee to Egypt, and it didn't work. But what we gained from that was the Shulchan Aruch, that because Maran was ordained by 200 rabbis, I don't know if directly or indirectly, by 200 rabbis, was empowered by them. So his book, the Shulchan Aruch, became like the most accepted code of law for Olam Israel. So that's a gift that we got from those years, from that time. Another rabbi I want to mention to you is Rabbi Shemuel Bibas. You know, it's something that is only recently known how much, or acknowledged how much he contributed to the establishment or the idea of Zionism, going back to Zion. And the reason why he was not known is because we have almost nothing left of what he wrote, if he ever wrote anything. So we don't have anything of what he wrote. But recently, they discovered some letters in which, the most important of these letters is one that tells about his encounter with Rabbi Yehuda al-Kalai, which was a little younger than him. So he met with Rabbi Yehuda al-Kalai in Livorno, in Italy, Leghorn, in Italy, and there he told him about his dream. So let me explain to you what was the dream of Rabbi Yehuda Bibas. Rabbi Yehuda Bibas, born in Gibraltar, he lived, or he was the rabbi of the island of Corfu, which is an island, that belongs to Greece. A lot of Greek Jews were there, and Italian Jews were there too. So he was the rabbi of the Italian Jews in Corfu. And the time is around 1830. So what did he see? He saw that by 1830, the Ottoman Empire was going down in their power and their influence, and Greece at that time is gaining their independence from the Ottoman Empire. So he said, if the Greeks can do this, why us? Why wouldn't us, the Jewish people, that we are, Baruch Hashem, so powerful in Europe, here, there, let's learn, let's teach. This is what he said. Let's teach our youth to fight, and let's go back to Eretz Israel and conquer it in the same way that the Greeks have done with Greece, that it belonged before that to the Ottoman Empire, and they recovered that and they got their independence. He proclaimed this message everywhere in Europe, and it got to the attention of one rabbi there, and that rabbi was Rabbi Yehuda al-Kalai. Now, Rabbi Yehuda al-Kalai is very famous. He was from the Bosnia, Serbia, from that region, and Rabbi Yehuda al-Kalai, unlike Rabbi Yehuda Bibas, he wrote a lot. He wrote a lot of books. So what we need to know is that many of these ideas were inspired by Rabbi Yehuda Vivas. And Rabbi Yehuda al-Kalai, he wrote about in the he published his books 1840, 1850, a little later than Rabbi Yehuda Vivas. And in one of his most famous books, Goral LaHashem, he explains 2 or 3 things that I'm going to tell you. First of all, he advocates for building colonies and building factories and railroad and highways in Israel, because at that time, many Jews were very, very wealthy. In the Ashkenazi world, the Rothschilds, in the Sephardic world, the Tsar Moshe Montefiore, Lord Moshe Montefiore, again, I'm talking about 1850, and he met, Rabbi Yehuda al-Kalai met with Rabbi Moshe Montefiore. Actually, if you read Hebrew and you want to see the book Goral LaHashem, written by Rabbi Yehuda al-Kalai in Hebrew, 1850, you will see that the introduction, this is something amazing, the introduction is written in Hebrew and signed in Hebrew by Moshe Montefiore Samachtet. This is how he used to sign the documents. So he was a great supporter of this idea. Lord Moshe Montefiore was one of the biggest heroes of the establishment of the State of Israel, or the supporter of the colonies of the State of Israel, one of the biggest advocates for the Jewish people. His role in the Damascus label, 1840, this is the same year of the Al-Adadi, as you know, was very, very important. So I think that now, wait, something incredible is that one of the Mitpalelim, one of the community members of the synagogue of Rabbi Yehuda al-Kalai, was no other than Simon Lev Herzl, who was the grandfather of Theodor Herzl. Okay, and there are many. You can check this in the internet. I think even Wikipedia says that the somehow I don't know if Herzl read Hebrew. I don't think so. But the books of Rabbi Yehuda al-Kalai were translated into English, into French, probably into German too. So he probably had access to it, because the Judenstaat, the state of the Jew, that's the real translation of Judenstaat. The state is more the state for a Jew, or a state for a Jew. That's the book of Herzl, okay? And without taking the credit, any credit from Herzl, that he really, had this incredible vision, and coming from a secular point of view. But Goral LaHashem and the Judenstaat, who was written in 1895 or published in 1895, they have a lot of similarities in the sense of, they have to go back to Israel, etc. So perhaps that influenced Herzl, perhaps not. I don't know, but any book that brings the story of Zionism. I'm reading now a new book. It's called From the Beginning of Zionism to Our Days, and written by Howard Sachar, Sechar. So, and any book, even in the modern historical narrative of Mediat Israel, Rabbi Yehuda al-Kalai is credited like the first visionary that saw the reality of Jews coming back to Israel. So this is, again, 1840, 1845. And what they fail to mention, but right now is changing, is that Rabbi Yehuda Vivas was one of the first to do it. Yesterday I had a big surprise, because I was searching about Herzl, because I'm writing about them, and I really like what I see, and I learn a lot, and I have to confess I had a lot of prejudice against them, but seeing where he lived, etc., you understand how great this man was. It said there in the biography of Herzl, in Wikipedia, it said that there were other precursors of Zionism, and to my surprise, very recently, like maybe last year, one of them right now in Wikipedia is Rabbi Shemuel Vivas, and I was very happy because it has there two sources, and one of the sources was Halakha of the Day in the Wikipedia article about Rabbi Yehuda Vivas as being one of the first promoters of Zionism, of the Zionist idea. However, there is another figure that virtually no one knows, no one's acknowledged, no one gives him any credit. And he did an incredible thing. He failed. But what he was able to envision and to articulate in 1825. So we are talking about, a couple of years before Rabbi Yehuda Vivas goes and announces to the world that this is what we need to do. And 20 years before Rabbi Yehuda Kalai writes Goral LaHashem, and we're talking about 70 years before Herzl writes his famous book, The State of the Jew, where he articulates his vision for a Jewish state. Okay, so I don't think that they took it from him, but this effort was taking place in a parallel space, actually in the state of New York, okay, in 1825. And I think that this man that I'm going to mention to you right now, he deserves much, much more credit than what he has, because I always feel a little bit guilty that we don't talk enough about him. I have to write about him, or maybe, we have to do certain Techiat HaMetim, certain resurrection of him, because he was an incredible man. He was such an incredible contributor to the Jewish cause. So the first time I heard or I read about him was from this book. Don't forget that I wasn't born in America. So this book is called History of the Jews in America. It's an old book, and I got my hands on this book when I was in Atlanta. This book was first published, listen to this, in 1912. So we're talking about a long time before the establishment of Medinat Israel. That's the first edition of this book. So this book tells us about the history of the Jews in America. And for the first time, I read about Mordechai, Manuel, Noach, all right? So you can see here, I don't know if you can read from there, Mordechai, Manuel, Noach. Okay, Mordechai Manuel Noach was a Sephardic Jew born in Philadelphia in July 1785, and he died in New York in March 1851. He was a Jew from Portuguese origin. Sorry, one second. As you know, the first Jews that came to New York actually were Sephardim from Portugal. That was not his case. His family, the history of his family is amazing. I don't have the time to tell you right now about his great-grandfather. But his great-grandfather, he came to Savannah, Georgia. He escaped the Inquisition and in a boat. He was very rich. He was a very important doctor, and he escaped. He escaped from Portugal to England, and from England they came to Savannah, Georgia, and they established themselves there. But then they came to New York, etc. So that grandfather and that great-grandfather and his grandfather, Jonah Phillips, who was also a military man and known by George Washington. Okay, so he was raised by Jonah Phillips, who was an observant Jew. Okay, now Mordechai Noach was an important politician in America, very important politician. He started to work in Washington, and here I have a different book, which is, of course, is dedicated only to him, and you will be like surprised how come he's not better known. Major Noach, if you can see Major Noach, it says American Jewish pioneer. All right, now in 1812 he was appointed, after a brief political career, he was appointed as the ambassador, the American ambassador in Tunis and Algeria. And he had there two very important interventions. One of them was to release some American soldiers that were captured by Arabs, pirates, and were taken to Algiers. And they were asking for a ransom. Now, his mission was, you have to convince them that the American government is not paying, because if the pirates would know that the American government was paying, they would demand like a tremendous amount of money, and we want to pay only $1,000 in those days. Okay, so you have to convince them that actually the government doesn't want to do any ransom. The government is not interested in negotiating with pirates, but his family members want to do that. So offer them this little money. So he did a great job, and he actually freed the prisoners, but he paid more money than what was allocated for them. And in those moments, Mr. Monroe, he was a Secretary of State, wrote to him that the following. He said that he was going to remove him from office despite having done a great job. So let me read it for you. Mr. Monroe, then Secretary of State, wrote to Noach that it was not known at the time of his appointment that his religion, Noah's religion, would be any obstacle to the exercise of his consular functions. Okay, so the president therefore had deemed it expedient to revoke his commission, and that upon the receipt of this letter, he should consider himself as no longer in the service of the United States. Noah was furious, and he defended himself in a very, very eloquent way. And he did many things that created precedents for freedom of religion and freedom of cult in America. Things that were like in the letter of the Constitution but were never applied. So I give you two examples. One that I just remember right now, I'm going to mention it. I don't remember exactly the name of the other minister that when Noah was invested as the sheriff of New York. Seriously, he was the sheriff of New York. He had to. They had to swear on the Bible for Yeshua, etc. And at that time, they applied a law that everybody should swear to the book that represents his own creed and conscience. And that was one thing that was done at his time. Another thing for which he was, or he should be considered responsible for it, was that at one point, when he was in Algiers, the pirates, who like in those days, pirates were like a legal thing, okay? So many people would buy from them, but England had made a pact that no Christian nation will buy from the pirates when they had taken this merchandise from another Christian nation. So they came to him and they say, "Look, you just you bought the cargo of these pirates, and you need to know that we have a treaty. America, as a Christian nation, cannot buy these things." So let me read for you. The British minister protested against such sale, the sale of merchandise that Noah was buying for America, on the ground of a clause in the treaty with England, which provided that no Christian power should sell a British price of his cargo in an Algerian port. Noah admitted the bona fide of this stipulation, the good faith. In good faith, you're right, because the majority of Americans are Christians, but contended that under proper interpretation of international law, the United States could not be held to be a Christian nation within the meaning of the treaty, and hence was accepted from the inhibition. So that also is like a first precedent in the early 20s of a Jew that is telling, and is interpreting the American Constitution, saying, well, by law, by constitutional law, America is not a Christian nation, although the majority is, okay? And that was ratified. Okay, so it's a very, very long story. He was a very important journalist in New York. He was the editor of the National Advocate. This is 1816. New York Enquirer, Evening Star, Commercial Advertiser, and the Times of Messenger. Okay, okay. So he was also a playwright, really an exceptional politician, and who never hid his Jewishness. He was always very proud, and he fought. I mean, I'm reading from the short book that has like 3 pages. But if you want to see more about him, you can get this book. I'm sure you can get it in Amazon, a used book, and you will have all the details about his career. Okay, so again, he was appointed High Sheriff of New York in 1822. All right. Now, 1825. What happened in 1825 with Major Noah, Mordechai, Manuel, Noah? Okay, so let me read this for you. He had strong convictions on the subject of Jewish nationality. Those who were in my class yesterday understand what I'm trying to say. Jewish nationality was disappearing as an idea because Napoleon gave emancipation to the Jews, but he required from them a complete loyalty to France, which meant that you have to renounce to your aspiration to go back to Palestine or to the Promised Land. You don't have any other land by this. And the Jews had to redefine themselves as a religion without a nation, without any geographical reference. Okay, and that changed completely the game, because if we do that, we're actually renouncing to our rights to the land of Israel. Okay, if we accept a nationality and we're now, Noah had very clear that in America you could be a faithful American and still a Jew, with your, as we do, with your unrestricted allegiance to both, to America, your allegiance to Israel. Okay, so he had strong convictions. Again, this book was written in 1912 on the subject of his Jewish nationality, and devoted considerable attention to the Jewish question in general. In other books, Jewish question is called the Jewish problem. What do you do with the Jewish problem? The Jewish problem is that Jews are a minority that nobody wants, but they are stuck there in Europe or in here or in there. And what do we do with them? That's the Jewish problem. And as Herzl wrote after the Dreyfus affair, he says, we have tried everything. We try to accommodate, to assimilate, to even to convert, to be loyal, to fight for you, like Dreyfus fought for France against Germany, and then he was falsely accused of being a spy for Germany. So now, finally, in 1825, he turned to his long-cherished scheme of the restoration of the Jews to their past glory as a nation. Now, this is a man that has some political power in America and has also friends that are very influential. And he had, well, there are some discussions how much money he had, but he had friends with money. So what did they do? What did he do? So for this purpose, he acquired, with the help of some of his friends, an island. He acquired an island. Where is that island? Okay. Now, if you never heard about this story, you better hold your chair right now. 13 miles in length and about 5 miles broad. This island is called Grand Island. And this island is in the Niagara River, not far from Buffalo, New York State. This island is here. Okay? Now, he issued a proclamation to the Jews of the world, and it says, please come to America. America doesn't only grant citizenship to everyone that comes, regardless of his religion, but also protects them, and there is no discrimination in America as open as there is in Europe. So you Jews of Europe, you better come here. Now, I don't know why this book doesn't mention it, but I got my hands, it was like maybe 7 years ago. I got my hands in the document that I don't know where it is, somehow in my computer, maybe I lost it, but miraculously, I got to an archive of like 90 pages where when I was reading about Noah for the first time, that exchanges of letters that he had with different leaders of European Jewry and different leaders of of American Jewry. So it's not that he came like overnight and said, I'm going to buy the island, everybody should come here. He tried for 3-4 years. And I remember when I read those letters, I got the impression that nobody wanted to listen to him. I mean, he looked like an utopian, okay? Or the Jews were very divided. They didn't want to abandon Europe. They were doing well in Europe. 1820, 1825. They just got their emancipation, so they completely rejected Noah. It was a big failure what happened, but he did it anyways, and it is a little bit sad and funny at the same time, because he set a day for the inauguration of this island that he called it Ararat. Now, why he call it Ararat? Because Mountain Ararat is where the Ark of Noah was placed, and it was the refuge of Noah for a while. So let me read to you. Noah issued a proclamation to the Jews of the world, inviting them to come and settle in that place, which he named Ararat, a city of refuge for the Jews. Okay, now the plan had its practical side and attracted considerable attention. Okay, and let me read to you what this book says, so there are no mistakes who Noah was. He was the most prominent Jew in America in the first half of the 19th century. The most prominent, most known Jew, and most probably powerful in terms of politics. Noah was at that time perhaps the most distinguished Jewish resident in America, and could by no means be considered a visionary in the terms of utopian. Okay, now this place was in the in the Great Lakes in Erie Canal, and Noah deemed it preeminently calculated to become in time the greatest trading and commercial depot in the new and better world. From America to Europe, he thought that this could be. So that day, okay, after heralding this project for some time in his own newspapers, he announced in his own newspapers, I'm inaugurating this island for all the Jews to come and live there as a city of refuge. I'm still not telling you the last intention of Noah. I'm reserving this for the end, okay? But now he selected a date, September 2, 1825. September 2, 1825, that was the date for laying the foundation stone of the new city. And he did the ceremony. Now, because there were no enough boats to go from Buffalo to the Grand Island, okay, as he wanted, he had to do the ceremony in Buffalo itself. Now, this is the funny or the sad part. Who came to the ceremony? All right. So apparently the only Jew that came there was Noah himself. All right. And he came there, a procession headed by a band of music. He brought all the fanfare, okay, by a band of music was composed of military companies. So he brought the military that they were with him, and several Masonic bodies in full regalia. After which came Noah as governor and judge of Israel, wearing a judicial robe of crimson silk trimmed with ermine, okay? After that, the procession had also some Episcopalian dignitaries, some church dignitaries that were actually happy because, many Christians, especially non-Catholic Christians, they had this idea that if Jews come back to Israel, then Yeshua will come back again. For whatever reason, they were very supportive. And then that's the most interesting, the most curious part was that the only people that attended, or the main people that attended the ceremony were the Native Americans, a very important group of selected representatives of the Native Americans. why the Native Americans came there. Why? What were the Native Americans doing there? Because Noah, he insisted, since 1820, he insisted, based on a book written by a Portuguese Jew, by Rabbi Menachem ben Israel, he insisted that the Native Americans were originally part of the Jewish tribes. This is what he said. Now, why? It's not written in any of these books, but I know the story because I studied the book. I actually have it. I showed it to my son the other day. This book is called Esperanza de Israel, The Hope of Israel. You can find it online. Or The Origin of the Americans. And they are Menachem ben Israel, based on a story by Antonio de Montesinos, one explorer in the early 16th century. He says that many Native Americans are originally Jews that came from the lost tribes. So he was calling for the restoration of the Israelite nation, okay, and that included that the many Native Americans. I believe, especially from what I read in this book, that he was also telling them, the Americans, in the same way that Europe had the Jewish question, the Jewish problem, America had the Indians' problem. Okay, what to do with the Indians? So for them, knowing that that the Indians would be coming with Noah was like something good. Okay, so let me read for you what he writes here. Firmly, as I believe, I'm reading from Noah himself. This was published in one of his newspapers. As I believe the American Indians to have been descended from the tribes of Israel, and that our continent is full of the most extraordinary vestige of antiquity, there is one point, a religious as well as historical point, in which you may possibly continue to doubt amidst evidences, but he says that they are the remnants of the 9.5 tribes which were carried into Assyria, and if we are to believe in all the promises of the restoration and the fulfillment of the prophecies, they are part of the nation. Okay, so that's a different story. But then nothing happened. Nothing happened. But let me tell you now what was his vision and why I'm saying that he anticipated Herzl and everyone else. He said clearly, I'm not telling the Jews to come to Grand Island to live in Grand Island. He said, our place is Palestine, is Israel. And my intention is to bring the Jews to Israel. And I have a plan, and he delineates the plan here. If I have time, I'm going to read it for you. He says, but we first need to organize ourselves politically, and then when we are politically organized and we have our judges and our governors and everything, then we do massive aliyah towards Israel. That was his plan. That was his plan, 1825. So the only thing I can do right now with this limited time is to read for you some of what he wrote, which is really beautiful. How was he thinking to get to Israel? Not by the sword. He was thinking to get to Israel by the power of the purchase. Now, in those days, 1825, Israel was part of something in between Turkey and Egypt. It was a pasha in Egypt that had the government of Israel. So, and Israel wasn't called even Palestine. Palestine is a late name. Israel was called Southern Syria or Syria. That, like the province of Syria, including, we're talking about 1825. my belief is, I'm quoting from Mordechai, that Syria will revert to the Jewish nation by purchase, and that the facility exhibited in the accumulation of wealth of the Jews. Jews now, they live in Europe, Baruch Hashem, they have money, has been a providential and peculiar gift to enable them at the proper time to reoccupy their Asian possession by the purse string instead of the sword. Okay, so he says, I have a plan. So we live in a remarkable age, and political events are producing extraordinary changes among the nations of the earth. So he's talking about Russia, etc. Turkey is pressing, Russia is pressing very hard on Turkey. The Pasha of Egypt, taking advantage of the improvements and inventions of men of genius, is extending his territory and influence to the over the Red Sea, okay? And is saying that seriously threaten the safety of British possessions in the East Indias, etc. So, as he have said before, he said how we can come back. This can be done by restoring Syria to its rightful owners, not by revolution or blood. As I have said, by the purchase of that territory from the Pasha of Egypt, listen to this, for a sum of money too tempting in its amount for them to refuse in the present reduced state of his coffers. So that's what he was thinking. Now, how much money, here you even have how much money he was thinking. And I wish I could unmute you and you tell me, what do you think? You know, how much money? He also has a sum of money that would be absolutely tempting for the Pasha to buy the land of Israel. So they would go to Grand Island, from Grand Island purchase the land of Israel, and then do Aliyah. So he says 12 or 13 millions of dollars, 12 or 13 millions of dollars. I have no idea. This is 1825. I don't know what is the equivalent of today, but probably I don't know if it's $1 trillion. I have no idea. I don't know. 12 or 13 million dollars have been spoken of in reference in the cession of that interest territory. Look what he says right now. A sum of no consideration to the Jews. Rothschild and Montefiore, they can raise that immediately. That's not a problem for the Jews. For the goodwill and peaceable possession of a land which to them, to the Jews, is above all price. Under the cooperation and protection of England and France, this reoccupation of Syria within its own territorial limits is at once reasonable and practicable. So he spoke for 1 hour. He wrote many articles. At that day and even afterwards, he insisted, but he didn't have the support. I mean, I urge you to read more about him. I think that we need to do something in his honor one time, because you know, he was the first modern Zionist, the first modern secular. I don't know if he was secular. He knew much more than Herzl. His grandfather, who raised him, was an observant Jew, observant in the terms of, you know, 1810 or 1800. They did whatever they could, but he was a very, I cannot tell you enough, because I have read a lot. I cannot tell you enough how much Jewish pride he had. Incredible Jewish pride, okay? And he was very eloquent. He was never defensive of his religion, his nationality, and it's really unfortunate that he is not known. Now, I didn't finish, but I think this will be enough to give you some idea about the contribution of some Sephardic forgotten giants that to the establishment of the land of the state of Israel, even though it failed, and even though I have no idea if he influenced anyone, if he influenced Rabbi Vivas or El Kalai or Herzl, was never mentioned, okay? And it was like forgotten. I got to know about him just by coincidence, and I'm sure most of you never heard about it. I'm sure they don't teach about him in Jewish schools, but he was really a giant, and he had a very clear notion, and you know how many millions of lives could have been saved if this would have happened. Now, going back to Yom HaAtzmaut, right? It was the moment of the declaration of the independence of Israel was really in the darkest hour for the Jews of Israel. That moment, the May 15 of 1948, one day before that, the whole cabinet, and Ben Gurion, and Moshe Sharet, and Golda Meir, they all got together, and 100 people were there, maybe, and they were evaluating, assessing what chances do we have of surviving a war, because they knew that Syria, Egypt, Iraq, and Lebanon were opposed, were going to attack Israel, okay, if Israel declares independence. Then Moshe Sharet comes with bad news. He says, you know, America says, this is the 14th of May. America warns against us declaring the independence. We shouldn't declare independence. They are not going to help us. They're not going to send army. They're not going to send ammunition or weapons, nothing. We're on our own, okay? And if you want to know more about this, you have to see this incredible movie about the pilots that came to Israel at the most difficult moment. But even with that, we had zero. And we were against 4 armies that I just mentioned. But at that day, also Golda Meir comes and says, I have worse news. Jordan, our neighbor, that the king of Jordan, at the beginning, he was in favor of us creating our state of Israel, our Jewish state. Now he is against it. I'm just checking at the time. It's 8:24. I have 5 more minutes. He's now against it. Okay. So what are we going to do? We have no chances, no real chances to withstand, to survive a war against 5 organized armies, 5 countries with organized armies that have the support of France and England. There is no possibility that we will survive. And this is 48. They had very fresh memories of the Holocaust. And there was one thought that was probably the most painful thought. Follow me. They thought if the Germans that were so, so much culture and so educated, so polite, so much Wagner and classical music and philosophy and Schopenhauer, if the educated Germans were able to kill men, women, children, elders in gas chambers, what would the Arabs do to us? So just think about that. The Arabs that are not civilized as the Germans, what they would do to us. Now, I think if I would have been there, I would have said, you know what? Okay, forget about it. Let's wait. Let's don't do it. So against all odds, we did something. So Ben Gurion made a decision, and he says, we got to do it. And the next day we did it. Now, our survival and beyond the fact that we won this Milchemet HaShichrur, the Milchemet HaAtzmaut, is is, as I said, and it's not a cliche. This is not a cliche, but it's perhaps the biggest miracle since the Yetziat Mitzrayim, probably. But what made us deserve this? So I have a theory. What probably made us deserve this is that, unlike the time of Mordechai Noach, here we were united. Somehow, in that cabinet, or in that gathering of Jews making this decision, and in the declaration of the signatories of the Declaration of the Independence, there were Jews from the socialist Jews from the left, like Bernie Sanders, but Zionist, but with all socialist leftist ideas, okay? Then progressive Jews and Jews in the center, Jews to the right, more right-wing Jews, and religious Jews. And as you know, religious Jews, not all of them are united. So we're Sephardim and Ashkenazim, both also. And in the signing of the Declaration of Independence, there were 5 rabbis. 3 were one was Sephardic, or 2 were Sephardim, Rabbi Kubashi, I remember Rabbi Kubashi, and then 3 were Zionist rabbis, and 2 were from Agudat Israel. 2 rabbis from Agudat Israel. That's something that is probably, I don't know if it's known or unknown, okay? But all of us were together, and perhaps this is why we deserve to have Mirat Israel. And one of the rabbis, his name was Moshe Maimon, which he was the first minister of religion, Sarah Datot, in Israel. Moshe Maimon, he said the following after Ben Gurion declared the independence of the state of Israel. He said, Baruch Ata Hashem Elokeinu Melech HaOlam She'echianu V'kiyemanu V'higianu Lazeman Hazeh. Blessed are you, Borei Olam. We finally, you granted us life, and you granted us the opportunity to be alive and to see this special moment. And I just hope that we don't take for granted having Mirat Israel. We don't take for granted, and that we owe a lot of gratitude to our heroes and to Borei Olam that didn't forget us and gave us back the most beautiful land, the land of Israel. Thank you very much to all, and Chag HaAtzmaut Sameach. May you enjoy the blessing of this beautiful day. Kol Tov.
Chazak Baruch.
Kol Tov.
Thank you. Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
Chazak Baruch. Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
Thank you.
Kol Tov.
Chag Sameach.